Here's the debate question. The debate question is this book Rhaenyra the protagonist versus Alicent the antagonist? I say no. It's two people that care about themselves, that are only about themselves, and that's why it's called a tragedy, because it's two people that are not Daenerys Targaryen. I am very sorry about that, but it's two people that only care about themselves in this situation. There is no hero in this story here, in my opinion.
I don't think there's a hero either. I don't think there's really meant to be. I think it's more so it comes down to principle for Rhaenyra. You know, she was proclaimed as the heir to the Iron Throne. People swore fealty to her. Viserys never once, well, he had second-guessed himself one time, but he had never once said, no, I'm thinking about making Aegon heir. And to your point that you had already mentioned, the big difference between the novel and the show is that there was never brought up this Song of Ice and Fire and Aegon's dream and had this miscommunication as he was dying to Alicent, to where you can really see that Alicent could have possibly confused the situation. You know, in the novel, it really makes it seem like, oh, well, now that King Viserys is gone, we're just going to make a play for the throne because we think it's the right thing. And if the way that it's portrayed there, it really makes it more black and white as, oh man, Alicent did something bad. She shouldn't have done this, so let's take Rhaenyra's side. But on the flip side of that coin, I think the novel also does a good job of explaining Rhaenyra's faults and how, you know, she herself is not painted in the greatest way at all times. You know, from the parts where she's learning how to please a man and trying to get with Sir Criston Cole, and he's the member of the Kingsguard, and he's shutting her down, according to Septon Eustace's account, and the whatever one you want to go with. Then on top of that, she's killing people and feeding them to her dragons, and she just seems more ruthless and less caring, because we see in the show, especially in episode 10, she even considers accepting the terms because she doesn't want to rule over Ash and Bone, and you know, she seems like she cares about people a lot more in the show. Where in the book, it's like, no, that throne's mine, motherfucker, and I'm gonna take that shit by any means necessary. Right? I mean, the whole fucking book is called Fire and Blood, you know, just to kind of draw a fun comparison. Remember when Daenerys said, you know, I will take what is mine by fire and blood, I will take it. That's kind of similar to what it seemed like with Rhaenyra here. And I really think that the novel does a great job of painting them both as antagonists in a way. I honestly think that that's more along the lines of what the book is trying to do, is show that this whole dance and this tragedy happened because two people could not overcome their own desires and what they thought was right for them. Rhaenyra thought it was right because she was proclaimed heir from everyone. They all swore fealty to her. Then she never got along with Alicent in the first place, so she was ready to, you know, to ascend to the throne once Viserys passed away. She thought that it was the right line of succession. And then Alicent's like, well, hold on a second. I have the king's firstborn son, and this is how the tradition has gone through the entirety of history. When it went, you know, from Aegon the Conqueror to where we're at now, it always goes to the first trueborn son of the king, and the king and I were married before we had this child, so that makes Aegon the second the first trueborn son of the king. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure your children are bastards, Rhaenyra, so your line is going to be muddled down regardless, so you have no claim to this nonsense. I'm doing the right thing. And then from there, it's just two people thinking they're in the right, and they're going to do whatever it takes to be right. So that's kind of what I drew from the book.
100% agree. And that's kind of the point I was trying to make on my side is, we always have people send us questions through our social media, like, well, what side do you guys take? You know, like Rhaenyra is the hero here, or Alicent's evil. It's not that. It's the fact of there are no good guys, in my opinion. This is just like you said. The novel, clearly, read the novel, because it paints them out to be two not so much angels that are going after each other.
To kind of remind everyone where we left off, we're talking about how Sir Vaemond was seized by Daemon and then had his head cut off and body fed to Syrax on Rhaenyra's orders. Again, big difference from what happens in the show. And then continuing on with that, on page 386, Vaemon's younger cousins with Vaemon's wife and sons. They go to King's Landing and they try to get justice and place their claims. And this is what I was talking about. Viserys makes a huge stand for the first time. And Viserys had each of their tongues removed because he had warned everyone previously when Aemon lost his eye that he would remove the tongues of anyone who would speak the quote-unquote lies of Rhaenyra's sons being bastards. This never happens in the show. Viserys never actually removes anyone's tongues. So in the book, it almost makes it seem like he's a stronger character and finally takes a stand for certain things. Like, I know he was meant to take that stand and back Rhaenyra's claim, I guess her son's claim, Lucerys the Driftmark, and that was supposed to be his big final stand. But in the novel, he even takes it a step further when Vaemon's cousins and wives and sons go to the damn place, and he's like, well, I told you not to say this shit, now you gotta lose your tongue. So that's definitely a huge difference. Then on page 387, this is where Viserys cuts his hand on the throne and he almost died. But Rhaenyra showed up with her maester Gerardus, who acted quickly and removed 2 fingers, which saved the king's life. Now, this whole skin disease in the show and him losing fingers happened much earlier. It did not take all the way up to this point of the conflict for the Driftwood throne and Driftmark. It didn't take up until after that for this to start happening. It was already progressing from early on in the season for the show. Now, page 389, Viserys' chest pains had grown so severe that he could no longer climb a flight of steps and he needed to be carried around the Red Keep. Again, different conditions. We saw him just not be able to walk at all, and his face and body melting. So anyways, this is the really important part here, and Chase had gone over it. I'm just going to go over it more in depth. On page 390, Princess Helena took her children, Viserys' grandchildren, to visit Viserys in his chambers. And King Viserys told the children the story of how King Jaehaerys flew on his dragon to the wall to defend it against a large host of wildlings, giants, and wargs. And he sent them off on their way because he was weary and his chest was feeling tight and he wanted to rest. And at that point, he never woke up again. And he was 52 years old. Where in the show, it's Alicent that goes to him in his chambers, and there's a miscommunication about Aegon the Conqueror's dream and the Song of Ice and Fire, and Alicent thinks Viserys is telling her that he wants their son Aegon to be king. There's no mention of Aegon's dream in this section of the book. It's not documented in the pages that cover this time period that Viserys ever said anything to anyone about Aegon's dream or the prince that was promised. So this is a huge difference here. Helena brought the grandchildren, and he told them a story and then went to sleep and never woke up. Where the whole thing. So this is what I'm saying. When we were talking about who the protagonist is, who the antagonist is, and this is what paints Alicent in a really bad light, is the fact that at least in the show, you can kind of make an excuse for her. Oh, she miscommunicated and she thinks this is what Viserys is telling her to do. Yeah, even that is a stretch. But in the novel, there's no stretch at all. She just straight up said, all right, he's dead, I'm taking over. And that's, so that's just something that's a little, not a little bit, much different.